The sun shone brightly over the quiet parking lot, glinting off chrome and leather. The sound of engines broke the calm like a sudden clap of thunder. A gang of bikers roared in, their tires screeching, and the rumble echoed down the street. People turned to look, some curious, others wary. But one figure caught everyone's attention more than the noise. A lone biker, cocky and confident, riding straight toward the center of the lot. He spotted her immediately, Steven Seagal's wife. Her posture was elegant, composed, completely unshaken by the gang surrounding her. But he didn't care. To him, she was a target, an opportunity to show dominance. With a wide, arrogant grin, he revved his bike, the engine growling like a beast. "Nice ride, lady," he shouted, his voice carrying over the roar. "Bet your husband can't save you." The words cut through the air, sharp and deliberate. A few people gasped, some took a step back, and whispers spread like wildfire. But the most important person in the lot, the man the biker wanted to provoke, remained perfectly still. Steven Seagal stood a few meters away, calm, unflinching. His eyes were focused, assessing. No anger, no reaction, just a quiet intensity that made the hairs on the back of the biker's neck stand on end, though he didn't notice it yet. The biker laughed, leaning closer, mocking, thinking he had the upper hand. "Hey, old man," he shouted, jerking a thumb toward Seagal. "You really gonna do something? Or just watch me have fun with your wife?" His gang laughed along with him, echoing the arrogance in a chorus of bravado. They had never seen him lose, and he thrived on that illusion. But in the midst of their laughter, the atmosphere began to shift. The calm aura around Seagal was like gravity. It pulled attention and tension toward him. The crowd around them went silent, watching the scene unfold. Some were excited, anticipating a fight. Others felt the cold prick of fear, realizing that this confrontation might not go as the biker imagined. And in that silence, in that moment, it became painfully clear. This wasn't just another woman on a parking lot. This was Steven Seagal's wife. And cockiness, as the biker would soon learn, has a price. The morning sun glinted off the polished chrome of the motorcycles as the gang idled in the parking lot. Engines purred and growled like restless predators, each biker adjusting leather jackets, heavy boots scraping against the asphalt. Laughter echoed across the lot. Loud, brash, cocky. They were a team, an unspoken alliance of arrogance and bravado. Each one fed off the other's ego, believing themselves untouchable. At the center of their attention stood a figure untouched by the chaos, Steven Seagal's wife. She was calm, composed, a picture of poise amidst the storm. Her eyes scanned the bikers briefly but without fear. She didn't flinch at their engines, didn't shift nervously, didn't signal for help. Her presence alone exuded quiet strength. It was a stark contrast to the bikers' loud, aggressive posturing. The leader of the gang, the cocky biker who had first taunted her, revved his bike once more, the engine's growl echoing like a warning. He leaned toward her, smirk wide, as if daring the world to challenge him. "Nice ride," he called, his tone dripping with mockery. "Bet your husband can't save you." He barked a laugh and circled her slowly, wheels kicking up tiny clouds of dust. Some of the gang chuckled, the sound nervous at first, unsure if this show of arrogance was smart. Yet they followed, their eyes constantly flicking toward Seagal, who remained a few steps back. Calm, silent, observant. The energy he radiated was different from anything they had encountered before. It was not flashy. It was not loud. But it was undeniable. Seagal didn't react immediately. He didn't clench his fists, didn't glare, didn't take a step forward. Instead, he stood silently, his posture relaxed yet commanding. His presence seemed to pull the energy of the crowd toward him. People began to notice. Conversations stopped mid-word. Phones slowly came out of pockets. Some passers-by whispered to each other. "Is that Steven Seagal?" The recognition spread like wildfire, yet the bikers seemed oblivious, consumed by their arrogance. The leader of the gang noticed the subtle shift in the crowd's energy and frowned. He leaned closer, shouting again, more insistently, trying to reassert dominance. "Hey, old man," he jeered, gesturing toward Seagal. "You really gonna do something? Or just watch me have fun with your wife?" He laughed, expecting the tension to break, expecting fear or anger. But Seagal remained calm. His wife, still composed, didn't speak, didn't respond. The silence between them felt heavier than any engine's roar. The crowd could feel it, a tension so thick it seemed almost tangible. The biker's confidence wavered for the first time, though he tried to hide it with a forced smirk. His gang began to notice the shift too, unease creeping into their bravado. The laughter that had once been so loud now sounded hollow. Seagal's gaze, though quiet, was sharp and precise. Every movement of the biker, every subtle shift of weight, every flicker of expression, was noted, measured, and understood. It was a predator's patience, a master's awareness. The energy in the lot began to change. Where once there had been a symphony of cockiness and bluster, now there was a silent tension, a waiting, as if the world itself held its breath. The biker, sensing something he couldn't fully see, scoffed nervously and revved his engine again. But it sounded different this time, not confident, not cocky, but forced, a sound meant to cover doubt. His crew mirrored him, revving their bikes in a desperate attempt to reassert dominance. But the aura around Seagal was unshakable. Calm authority radiated from him, subtle yet impossible to ignore. People around the lot began to shift, instinctively stepping back. The dynamic was no longer one-sided. The biker had intended to intimidate, to humiliate, to provoke. But the silent presence of Steven Seagal had inverted the power. The biker's smirk, once cocky and unwavering, began to falter. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. His hands gripped the handlebars tighter, knuckles white beneath the leather gloves. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The sun glinted off Seagal's calm expression, the quiet determination in his eyes cutting through the biker's arrogance. Every person present could feel it, the shift from predator to prey, from arrogance to reckoning. The parking lot, once alive with the roar of engines and laughter, became a stage for an unspoken lesson. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it simply stands. And in that moment, the biker realized, however faintly, that the man he had underestimated, the man he thought would never intervene, was no ordinary opponent. This realization, though not yet fully formed in his mind, was the first crack in the wall of his overconfidence. The tension was palpable. Every observer knew it. Every biker felt it. And the lesson had already begun. Arrogance attracts consequences, and underestimating Steven Seagal is a mistake no one survives unscathed. The cocky biker had already crossed the line, and now his arrogance surged. He revved his engine again, louder this time, trying to drown out the whispers and cautious murmurs of the crowd. The leather-clad gang laughed along, emboldened by their leader's show of defiance. To them, it was all a game, teasing, mocking, asserting dominance. They hadn't realized the game had already changed. Seagal's wife remained calm, her hands at her sides, her posture upright. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't even glance away. Her eyes, however, flickered briefly toward the biker, calm but sharp like a lighthouse beam cutting through the fog of his arrogance. That brief glance was enough to unsettle him, though he stubbornly refused to acknowledge it. "Hey, old man," the biker taunted again, leaning over his handlebars, his voice dripping with mockery. "You just gonna stand there? Or are you scared your old bones won't keep up?" He laughed loudly, and his crew echoed it, the sound harsh against the hum of engines. The biker's words were meant to provoke, to humiliate, to trigger fear. Seagal didn't answer immediately. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even move quickly. Instead, he stepped forward slowly, each motion deliberate, measured. His calm aura was magnetic, drawing attention away from the biker's bravado. The crowd instinctively took a step back, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Something about the way Seagal moved, silent, precise, controlled, made it clear that this confrontation was no longer a joke. The biker's smirk wavered for the first time. He scoffed nervously, trying to mask the sudden unease creeping into his chest. He revved his engine again, but the sound came out harsh, forced a mask for the growing doubt. His eyes darted to Seagal, searching for some sign of weakness, but found none. Calm, still, confident, powerful without effort. "You think you can intimidate me?" The biker shouted, his voice rising. He gestured toward Seagal's wife, as if daring the man to respond. "You're too old. You're just gonna let me have my fun?" Seagal stopped moving. He simply raised a hand, palm outward, a gesture so subtle it seemed almost casual. Yet it carried an unspoken warning. Enough. The gesture was enough to make the biker pause. the first crack appearing in his armor of arrogance. The crowd could sense it. A hush fell over the parking lot. Even the other bikers, who had once laughed so loudly, now looked uncertain, eyes darting between their leader and the man who radiated silent authority. The biker tried to regain control, leaning forward, trying to assert dominance. "You're lucky I don't," he began, but the words caught in his throat. The air itself seemed to tighten around him. Every nerve in his body screamed caution, but pride and fear of embarrassment kept him rooted. Seagal's calmness was suffocating. It wasn't a lack of emotion, it was a mastery of it. His eyes never left the biker, his breathing steady, unhurried. Every small motion of the biker was noted, the subtle shift of weight, the tightening of fists, the rapid blink of unease. And the more Seagal observed, the smaller the biker seemed to feel. The biker's gang sensed the change too. Their laughter had died down. Whispers of doubt spread among them. "Is that Steven Seagal?" someone muttered. Another shook his head, unease creeping into his posture. They had thought they were untouchable. They had thought arrogance was power. And now, for the first time, the illusion was crumbling. Desperation began to creep into the biker's movements. His voice faltered. He shifted his weight, trying to appear casual, but every gesture betrayed nervousness. The engines roared again, but the sound no longer held confidence. It was hollow, strained, trying to cover an instinctive fear. Seagal's wife finally spoke, softly, her voice calm and measured. "Rudeness is loud because it's insecure." The words weren't directed at anyone in particular, but the biker felt them in his chest. He swallowed, realizing perhaps too late that he had underestimated the situation entirely. The tension in the parking lot was electric. The biker's cockiness had been replaced by fear, subtle at first, then growing. The crowd, once spectators of bravado, now watched with bated breath, sensing that something decisive was about to happen. Seagal's calm, composed, unshakable presence had shifted the balance entirely. The biker, now pale under the mask of leather, realized his mistake. He had taunted the wrong person. And the lesson was about to be taught silently, swiftly, and undeniably. The air in the parking lot was thick, almost suffocating. Engines that had roared confidently moments ago now hummed uneasily, like animals sensing a predator nearby. The cocky biker, once brimming with arrogance, froze mid-motion, his hands gripping the handlebars as if they could anchor him against the invisible weight pressing down on him. Every muscle in his body betrayed his tension. His jaw, once tight with smug confidence, now quivered slightly. Seagal remained perfectly still, calm as ever. He didn't raise his voice, didn't gesture aggressively. He simply observed. His gaze was unwavering, locked on the biker who had just insulted his wife. There was no hatred in it, no need. The calm in his eyes was far more powerful than any shout, any threat. It was the kind of presence that made you instantly aware of your own insignificance. Around them, the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some had phones out, filming. Others murmured, trying to make sense of the sudden shift in energy. People who had initially been entertained by the biker's cockiness now found themselves holding their breath. The realization was dawning. This wasn't a typical parking lot showdown. Something far more serious was unfolding. The biker's crew looked at him nervously. The laughs that had echoed moments ago were gone, replaced by tense whispers and sidelong glances. Even his most loyal followers were questioning the situation. The leader's confidence, once a shield for them all, was now a liability. The unspoken question in the lot was clear. Had they underestimated this man? Seagal's wife remained calm as well. She took a single step forward, her posture upright, elegant, unshaken. There was no fear in her eyes, only quiet confidence, a reflection of the man she trusted completely. The biker's smirk faltered further. He had intended to provoke fear, to humiliate, but instead, he had revealed his own insecurity. The silence stretched. Even the hum of the engine seemed to fade, like the world itself had paused to witness the moment. The biker tried to recover, forcing a laugh that rang hollow. "Come on," he said, trying to regain his bravado. "You're not going to do anything, right?" But the statement hung in the air, almost comically futile. The crowd could see through it. The faker's confidence was transparent. He was no longer in control. The shift in energy was undeniable. He had taunted someone far more powerful than himself, and now the weight of that mistake settled on his shoulders. Seagal's steps were deliberate as he moved closer. The air seemed to tighten with every stride. There was no rush, No need to attack. The movement alone carried authority, and the biker's bravado cracked further under the unspoken message. He was outmatched. Completely. People in the crowd exchanged glances, whispers spreading quickly. Is that really? That's Steven Seagal. I can't believe he stayed calm this whole time. Even casual onlookers could sense the lesson about to unfold. Arrogance without awareness is dangerous. The biker shifted uneasily on his bike. He tried to act casual, swinging a leg over the seat, but every subtle movement betrayed panic. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, despite the warm sun overhead. His crew's unease grew, their confidence eroded by the same silent power that dominated the lot. Seagal's wife finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear. Fear hides behind loud words. The statement was simple, yet it pierced the biker like a knife. He swallowed, realizing he had been shouting not from courage, but from insecurity masked as bravado. The silence that followed was deafening. The crowd held its breath, watching the once cocky biker shrink under the calm authority of a man who did not need to fight loudly to assert dominance. Every onlooker understood the lesson unfolding before their eyes. Power does not need to scream. It does not need to threaten. It does not need to prove itself. It simply exists, unshakable and absolute. The biker's eyes darted around, desperate for some escape from the gaze that pinned him in place. But there was no escape. The lesson had already begun, and the shame of underestimating Seagal burned hotter than any physical blow could. The crowd began to whisper again, this time in awe and respect rather than fear. He's calm, completely calm. That's how you know he's in control. Even the biker's crew now looked on with a mix of fear and admiration, slowly realizing that their leader had misjudged the situation entirely. Seagal's presence didn't just dominate the biker, it dominated the lot. Every movement, every glance, every pause was deliberate, unhurried, and powerful. The lesson was clear, and the biker had no choice but to absorb it. Arrogance invites consequences, and disrespect can be fatal when directed at someone who moves with mastery rather than noise. The cocky biker could no longer hide the regret in his eyes. His smirk was gone, his laughter silenced. Every shred of bravado that had once shielded him was stripped away in the presence of quiet authority. Seagal took another step forward, calm, silent, certain. The crowd could feel the shift, as though the very air had changed. And in that moment, the biker realized the truth he had tried so hard to ignore. He had underestimated the wrong man. The biker's confidence was gone. Every ounce of swagger, every smirk, every laugh he had relied on to assert dominance had dissolved under the calm, unshakable presence of Steven Seagal. The crowd sensed it immediately, the shift from arrogance to reality, from bravado to fear. Seagal's steps were deliberate, unhurried, but every movement carried authority, precision, and control. The biker's hands tightened on the handlebars, knuckles whitening beneath the leather gloves, but it did nothing to restore his illusion of power. He was outmatched, and he knew it. Step down, Seagal said quietly, not loudly, not as a threat, just a simple, calm command. The words were measured, each one carrying weight far beyond their volume. The parking lot seemed to fall into silence once more. The hum of engines reduced to a low, nervous vibration. The biker froze. He glanced at his crew, expecting support, but they too were frozen, staring in awe and fear. Their leader's arrogance had led them into a trap, and now they had nowhere to run. The power of Seagal's calm presence was suffocating, undeniable. Every instinct in their bodies screamed retreat, yet pride kept them rooted in place. Seagal's wife, still composed, stepped slightly closer, her eyes calm but observant. The biker's arrogance had been aimed at her, and now the roles had shifted. He realized, far too late, that his attempt to provoke fear had instead revealed his own weakness. Enough, Seagal said again, his voice soft but firm. He moved with precision, a single step closing the distance between himself and the biker. The man tried to feign confidence, but his posture betrayed panic. Every muscle in his body tensed as he instinctively braced for confrontation. Yet the calm in Seagal's presence was more disarming than any physical threat. The crowd watched, holding their breath. The once loud biker who had mocked, who had boasted, who had taunted with reckless arrogance, now appeared small, almost childlike, under the weight of silent authority. His smirk had vanished. His laughter was gone. He had no words left, only the growing realization of the mistake he had made. Seagal's hand shot out in a motion so fast and precise it was almost invisible. In one seamless movement, he grabbed the biker's arm and flipped him off the bike, sending him crashing to the asphalt. The sound of the fall echoed across the lot, and a stunned silence followed. Not a single person moved. Not a single biker made a sound. The lesson had been delivered. The impact wasn't just physical, it was psychological. The cocky biker lay on the ground, staring up at Seagal, pale, stunned, and fully aware of the consequences of his arrogance. Pain radiated through his body, but the humiliation was far sharper than any bruise or scrape. He had underestimated someone who didn't need to yell, someone who didn't need to threaten, someone who moved with quiet, absolute authority. Seagal didn't shout, he didn't gesture, he simply turned, guiding his wife away with calm composure. The crowd's whispers grew louder, a mix of awe, relief, and respect. Phones recorded the moment, but even the lenses couldn't capture the full weight of the quiet power Seagal radiated. The biker's crew scrambled to check on him, but their faces betrayed something new. Fear, shame, and respect all rolled into one. They realized their arrogance had led them to a dangerous miscalculation. The lesson was clear. Disrespect someone who commands calm authority, and regret will follow instantly. The biker tried to speak, to reclaim some shred of dignity, but no words came. He looked at Seagal, then at his wife, then at the crowd, and in that instant, he understood the truth he had been blind to. Arrogance had led him to humiliation, and nothing could undo the moment. Seagal's wife walked beside him calmly, never once showing fear, never once breaking composure. Her quiet strength mirrored his own, a reminder that power doesn't need to be loud or explosive. It is measured, precise, and undeniable. The crowd slowly exhaled, tension giving way to awe. Whispers spread. He didn't even yell. He didn't even fight like the movies. And yet, that's power. That's control. Even the bikers who had once laughed the loudest now nodded quietly, acknowledging the lesson they had just witnessed. The cocky biker sat on the asphalt, shoulders slumped, pride shattered. Pain and humiliation mingled, leaving him stunned and regretful. He had taunted, mocked, and believed himself untouchable. And now, in the calmest way possible, Steven Seagal had shown him exactly who held the power. No one in the parking lot would forget the scene. The lesson was indelible. Arrogance is loud because it is afraid, and disrespecting someone who commands quiet authority will always carry consequences. Seagal walked away, his wife beside him, calm, composed, untouchable. The bikers' regret lingered long after their steps had faded, a silent testament to the lesson they had all witnessed. Power doesn't yell. Power doesn't boast. Power simply exists, undeniable and absolute. The parking lot was silent, but the silence carried weight. The roar of the motorcycles had faded into uneasy murmurs. The biker who had taunted Seagal's wife lay on the asphalt, pain radiating through his body. But even sharper than the physical ache was the sting of humiliation. Pride shattered, ego bruised, and the mocking words that had once given him courage now tasted bitter in his mouth. Every eye in the lot was on him, and for the first time, he felt the full measure of his arrogance. Seagal didn't rush forward or shout. He simply stood, a calm shadow beside his wife, observing the aftermath with a quiet authority that seemed to bend the air itself. There was no malice in his gaze, no desire for revenge, just control, precision, the certainty of a man who knew exactly how to handle any situation without unnecessary force. The biker groaned, pushing himself onto one elbow, trying to regain composure, but the crowd's reaction was merciless. Whispers of respect for Seagal and astonishment at the biker's failure rippled through onlookers. Even his own crew, who had laughed and cheered moments before, now avoided eye contact. The leader's cockiness had fallen like a house of cards, and everyone could see it. Seagal's wife stepped forward slightly, her eyes calm yet piercing. She didn't mock, she didn't shout, but the power in her presence was palpable. The biker's gaze flicked to her, realizing the depth of the mistake he had made. He had underestimated not only Seagal, but the quiet, unwavering strength of the woman he had dared to insult. The shame pressed down on him heavier than any pain from the fall. Seagal finally spoke, his voice measured, calm, but carrying an undeniable weight. "This ends now." The biker's head snapped up, panic flashing across his face. There was no anger, no threat, only authority. The simplicity of the words struck him like a hammer. The lesson was clear. Arrogance has consequences. Disrespect invites correction. The crowd could feel it. The biker had no options left. His crew shuffled awkwardly, unsure whether to intervene or simply escape. Some tried to help their leader up, but he waved them off weakly, unable to mask the humiliation. Pride had been his shield, but now there was nothing left to protect him. Seagal gestured toward the nearest wall, a subtle motion that was enough to command attention. Sit down. Think about what just happened. There was no need to raise his voice. The authority and the calm, deliberate gesture silenced any protest before it could begin. The biker obeyed instinctively, sinking back onto the asphalt, shoulders slumped. The lesson wasn't just for him, it was for everyone in the lot. Seagal's presence had shifted the balance of power entirely. The cocky gang members realized that their leader's arrogance had endangered all of them. What had seemed like a game of bravado had become a moment of reckoning. They would leave that parking lot forever changed, understanding that disrespect and arrogance are dangerous weapons when wielded blindly. Seagal's wife placed a hand lightly on his arm, calm, composed, and proud. Her presence alone reinforced the lesson. The biker's eyes flicked to her again, and the weight of his disrespect crushed him further. He had targeted someone he thought was powerless, and now he had witnessed the cost of misjudging a master. Seagal turned back to the crowd, silent for a moment, letting the lesson sink in. The murmurs grew into whispers of admiration. He didn't even raise his voice, just calm. And it was enough. The words echoed the truth. True power doesn't boast, it commands. The biker groaned again, finally acknowledging defeat. His hands dropped from the handlebars. No excuses, no threats. The lesson had been learned fully, painfully. Seagal's authority had restored order without chaos, without anger, without unnecessary violence. It was the quiet, perfect execution of justice. As Seagal and his wife walked away, the crowd parted instinctively. People felt compelled to give them space, to recognize the calm dignity and absolute control that radiated from them. The biker's gang slunk behind, ashamed, knowing the humiliation would not fade quickly. Every taunt, every moment of arrogance, now reflected back at them as a bitter memory. The lesson was complete. Arrogance invites consequences. Disrespect carries a cost. And those who underestimate calm authority will face it fully. Even as Seagal and his wife disappeared from view, the echoes of their presence lingered. The parking lot would remember this day forever, a day when arrogance was crushed, and quiet power commanded respect. The cocky biker would remember, too. Every word, every movement, every ounce of calm authority that had shown him the consequences of his actions. Power does not yell, it does not boast. It simply exists, absolute, calm, and undeniable. And anyone who dares to challenge it without understanding the cost will regret it instantly. The parking lot was quiet now, but the silence carried the weight of a lesson that no one present would ever forget. The engines of the motorcycles no longer roared. The laughter that had once filled the air had vanished, replaced by a collective understanding. Arrogance is loud because it fears being exposed. The cocky biker, once so full of swagger, lay slumped on the asphalt, his pride shattered, his ego bruised. Every taunt he had shouted, every mocking gesture he had made, now felt hollow and foolish. The lesson had not been delivered with chaos or rage. It had been delivered with calm, precise authority, a quiet force that was far more powerful than any shouting, any display of violence, any attempt at intimidation. Seagal and his wife had walked away, leaving behind a scene of realization and reflection. Every person in the lot, from casual onlookers to the remaining gang members, understood the truth that had unfolded before their eyes. Power does not need to shout. Respect does not need to demand itself. True authority is quiet, unwavering, and undeniable. The biker's crew, still frozen, finally moved, glancing back at their leader who now seemed smaller than he had ever appeared. They understood, instinctively, that their own arrogance had been a fragile mask. They had taunted, mocked, and believed themselves untouchable. And yet all it took was one calm, deliberate figure to dismantle their confidence completely. Seagal's wife walked beside him with quiet grace. There was no fear, no need for confrontation, only dignity and strength. It was a reminder that true composure is as powerful as skill itself. The lesson was not just for the biker, but for everyone who witnessed it. Underestimating someone based on arrogance or appearances is a dangerous mistake. The crowd began to murmur, slowly breaking the spell of tension that had held them. He didn't even shout. He didn't even fight aggressively. And yet, he won. That's control. That's authority. Words like these floated through the air, a reflection of what had truly transpired. The power displayed was not in fists or noise, but in measured action, in calm confidence, and in mastery of both mind and body. The biker sat on the asphalt, shoulders slumped, finally acknowledging the truth of his mistake. Pride had been his shield, but it had been shattered in an instant. His arrogance had blinded him to the strength of quiet authority, to the consequences of disrespect, and to the simple truth that taunting or mocking someone is always a gamble, one he had lost spectacularly. Seagal's calm presence left a lasting impression on every witness. The lesson was clear. Never judge someone by their silence. Never assume weakness based on appearance, age, or quiet demeanor. Respect is earned not by intimidation but by recognition of skill, composure, and character. Even as Seagal and his wife faded from view, their impact lingered. The lesson they delivered would resonate far longer than any words or loud actions could have achieved. Those who had witnessed the events would carry it with them. Arrogance and disrespect may seem bold, but they are fragile. True power is silent, measured, and undeniable. In life, many are tempted to taunt, to provoke, or to challenge based on superficial judgments. But this story serves as a stark reminder. Underestimating someone who commands respect, calmly and confidently, is a mistake with immediate consequences. The cocky biker's regret is a testament to that truth, a lesson paid for in humiliation, shock, and the stark realization that arrogance invites correction. Power does not need to raise its voice. Respect does not need to demand itself. The quiet, unwavering, and measured presence of those who truly master themselves is enough to command attention, to correct arrogance, and to teach lessons that are remembered long after the moment has passed. Type respect if you believe arrogance has limits. Type calm power if you believe true authority is silent but undeniable. Remember, never taunt, never mock, never underestimate. Because some lessons are delivered not with anger, but with calm mastery, and the consequences of misjudgment can be instant, unforgettable, and permanent. Arrogance shouts. Disrespect demands attention. But power moves silently, and those who fail to recognize it will regret it in seconds.